have so many resurrection stories from last winter. How much time do we have? I would invite you to prepare your hearts for the reading of the gospel. The gospel that I have selected for this resurrection story comes from the book of Mark. It's chapter 16, verses 1 through 20. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. And there you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now after he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went out and told those who had been with him while they were mourning and weeping. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe it. After this, he appeared in another form to 2 of them as they were walking into the country, and they went back and told the rest, but they did not believe them. Later, he appeared to the 11 themselves as they were sitting at the table, and he upbraided them for their lack of faith and stubbornness, because they had not believed him for those who saw him after he had risen. And he said to them, "Go into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation. The one who believes and is baptized will be saved, but the one who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. By using my name, they will cast out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes in their hands. And if they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick and they will recover." So then the Lord Jesus, after he had spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven and sat down at the right hand of God. And they went out and proclaimed the good news everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the message by the signs that accompanied it. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Would you join me in prayer? It is good to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises in your name most high, to proclaim your loyal love in the morning, your faithfulness at nighttime. Generous Lord, the wonders of your extravagant love display themselves in the glittering beauty of the night sky and the abundant fruitfulness of the earth. You have led us faithfully throughout our years, and Jesus, you have shown us the way to fullness of life. May our gratitude know no bounds as we praise your name in word and deed. Amen. Well, it is a blessing this morning to be with you. I am so thankful for everything that you guys did this last winter. A few years ago when I was in seminary, I encountered scripture and reflection by Sarah Miles, who is a kind of a famous pastor who serves church in San Francisco. And she writes about all kinds of things, but one of the things that she writes about is it's our job as Christians to feed and to heal and to raise the dead. Now, I don't know about you all, because I've never met you before, but I know that feeding and to some extent healing makes sense, and I can put that on pretty good. But this concept of raising the dead is something else. It is really something else. And I didn't know if we could do it, but boy, have we done it. It's the idea of being a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope. The risen Christ was alive in our trust, a trust that all of us suspended our darkest assumptions and trusted the good of the work of God. First, I have a story about Kimberly. Kimberly is a parishioner of mine whose birthday is today. And her mother wrote me a note saying, please pray for Kim and I as we travel to Denver for her 6-month follow-up. Now, this 6-month follow-up is from a bone marrow transplant because it was last year in 2017, the very last day of senior high church camp, that Kimberly was diagnosed with leukemia. This devastated her. She is a former cross-country champ, took 2nd place at state in junior high, and had great goals of doing so much more in high school. And all of a sudden, her world is crushed. And it crushed not just Kimberly, but it crushed all of her friends. It crushed our church to think that somebody so young could go through something so devastating. And she went through testing and treatments and chemo and radiation, and you name it, they tried it. She flew to Stanford to try a new thing, and it didn't take in her body. And so she was brought way, way, way down low. Bone marrow transplant isn't easy for anyone, but in doing a bone marrow transplant, what they have to do is they have to kill off pretty much everything and start fresh. So she went through a series of radiation that killed off all of the leukemia cells in her body, but her immunity, all of the things that made Kimberly who she was, all of the things that she had grown up with, all of those vaccinations from her own infancy, gone. She was totally made empty. And then they gave her this healing thing. It actually was a bone marrow transplant style of treatment, but it came from an umbilical cord from a baby that was born in France. And she, her body accepted it, and it started to grow, and she is in the process of healing, and in the process of growing stronger and stronger and stronger each day. And my congregation and the whole community of Columbia Falls gives great thanks. This has not been an easy road by far. Her pastor, her friends, her family have all been torn to pieces and rebuilt by the love of God. So I'd ask for your prayers, your continued prayers for Kimberly as she celebrates her 17th birthday today, and hopefully we'll have many, many, many more to come. So in February, I think it was President's Day, I get a call from Calvin Hill in Browning, and he says, Dawn, we're gonna need some help. The reason he reached out to me is because I happen to be the UMCOR rep for the state of Montana and a little bit beyond that. And UMCOR is the United Methodist Committee on Relief, so we do disaster response. And I had just had my training last November, and I thought to myself, yeah, right, I won't have to use this training. God had other plans, I guess. So Calvin called me on President's Day, and I took the call, and he said, I think we're going to be asking the Methodist Church and UMCOR for a lot of help, and maybe even other people. And here's what's going on. There's people stuck in their homes. They've been stuck in their homes already for a long time. The tribal council had wanted to ask for help a couple of weeks ago. They tried to call an emergency meeting, and then half of them fell ill with the flu. So we've got the flu going around the reservation, and we've got this horrible storm that has kept the roads from being open. So I don't know how many of you voluntarily travel the winter over Marias Pass and into that side of the state. It's kind of tenuous, so most of us just stay home. And that includes trucks. They don't travel when the road is bad. So the community of Browning had about half of their delivery trucks. So you can imagine 1/2 of all the fuel trucks, 1/2 of all the medical supplies, 1/2 of all of the food that goes to the local grocery store. So the grocery store was empty. The town pump was how they were kind of rationing out their supply to folks. It was a pretty dire situation, and we don't get a lot of news about it. And frankly, the people in Great Falls weren't getting a lot of news about it either. It's not atypical for us to not know about what's going on these sovereign nations. There's a lot of pride involved, and it takes a lot to have to say, hey, we need help. So I get this call from Calvin, and it's sounding pretty desperate, and so I call our conference communicator and say, hey, there's a disaster going on, and I think we're going to need to send out some extra messaging to the people of the United Methodist Church and beyond, and I need your help because I can't do everything by myself. And she said, it's President's Day, you can call me tomorrow. She had no idea what disaster response meant. I don't know why. So then I thought, okay, well, that's okay. God, lead me. So God said, well, you've made some friends in the Kalispell area. Why don't you just get started? So I sent out a note, and Glenn, your pastor, got it, because I sent a note to all the pastors in the area, and he got it. And he was at a Presbyterian meeting that weekend, and he was busy raising funds, unbeknownst to me, in the background. And so I'm texting my bishop saying, okay, our conference communicator is not responding to me today, but we're going to need to ask UMCOR for some support. We're on standby at the moment because I have to get the official word that yes, the tribe wants us to be there. Because that's how disaster response is. The community has to ask for help and really want to have people come. There's a lot of sensitivity to it because we didn't want a bunch of evangelism. We figured that God's message can be sent through actions and words of love. So here we are waiting, and I am telling Calvin, yep, we're ready to go. Our bishop is aware, and blah, blah, blah. He called me again about an hour later. He said, I reached out to some people in the tribe, and I told them what you told me, and they said, yes, ask for that help because we need it. We had to revisit our treaty agreements in all of this, and it became known to us that in the original treaty of the Blackfeet Nation, that it says in there that in times of need they will reach out to the Methodist Church. At the time, it was written before the United Methodist Church existed, but they would reach out to the Methodists before the federal government. Guess what? Churches can do powerful things very quickly. We didn't have much red tape. I had exactly zero policy going into this. And so a couple of days later, well, actually the next day, I was at a circuit meeting from the United Methodist Church. And my colleagues, one of them was Maury, whose picture was showing up there, but they were surrounding me saying, we heard that you said yes on our behalf, which is really cool. Thank you for doing that. Let us know what we can do to support you. And on the way out of Perkins that morning, Maury whispered it towards me. He says, I think you've gone in over your head, girl. Maury and I have been friends for a very long time. We went to church camp together in high school. So I listened to him. I heard him. And I went, whoa. And I spent the next hour freaking out and praying to God. I said, I'm going to need a whole lot of help here because this is not something, I cannot save 15,000 people. I cannot do this all on my own, God. You're going to have to put everything into place. Make me a vessel of your will. So, and then got some clarity, and I thought, I've got to reach out for some help. And I don't know, I know that there's pride for that whole group of people that ask for help, but there's a lot of pride even in a pastor asking for help. So if Glenn is asking for help, it comes from a place of honesty and authenticity, that he's done the hard work and said yes, he needs the help. So I said, okay, I'm going to make a phone call. So I called my lay member and I said, we're going to set up an incident command center in Columbia Falls tomorrow. And she said, oh, okay. And I told her what was going on, and I said, I need your help. And she says, okay, I can clear my schedule. I had a couple of things going on, but this is more important, so I'm going to reset my priorities and make sure my calendar's clear for the next couple of days. What else can I do to help you? And I said, well, I would like you to show up. I'd like you to call a couple of people who can come. I'd like you to call a couple of our parishioners, people you can trust. This work is going to be hard, because some of the things that we're hearing about is loss of livestock, and possibly loss of human life. So I want you to make sure that you really trust that the people that are coming in will be able to maintain an action plan, even through anything hard that comes our way. She says, done, what else can I do? And I said, well, I know you're well connected, and I was wondering if it's possible for you to bring in a couple of folks who you know who have incident command skills, and they don't have to be church people. And she says, done. The next morning I get there and I'm setting up tables in the fellowship hall and trying to figure out how to make office spaces, getting paper and some supplies out, paper and pens and things like that. And then Nancy and her friends show up. And one of the things that we'd asked them was to bring your cell phone, because we need it. I don't have any extra lines at the church. We don't prepare for this kind of thing. So they all brought their phones and everything else, and it was a great, great thing. So my first line of duty was to ask them to start calling people they know. And the people who aren't church people started calling the Rotary. And the people who are church people started calling some of the other churches. And pretty soon, we had infant formula at our door, and we had money rolling in. And it was amazing. And I set up a conference call on a daily basis with the team in Browning. And it was Pastor Calvin and a few people from his congregation. And so we would have this morning briefing where he would tell us the situation report, and we would say, okay, here's our plan. Or if we didn't have a plan, we would say, okay, we will pray about that, and we will get back to you. And it was amazing, because we just had the generosity of everyone. And I could go on and on and on, and we could be here for hours. But let's fast forward a couple of days into this. And it was amazing, because some of the first people that I met were Miriam and Glenn and Tom, and is it Dick and Joan showed up. And they were smiling, and they had a big check. And we were to the point where I had gone, okay, God, we're going to need a lot more resources, because the tribe was asking for big things. They were asking for 6 semi-loads of firewood. I've never bought a semi-load of firewood. Has anyone here? We found 6 semi-loads of firewood, and it cost exactly $10,000. They were asking for some potatoes, and I had one of my volunteers go down and take all the potatoes that were in the back room of Super One. It turned out to be 150 pounds of potatoes. So my volunteers were pretty excited. They're like, we can send potatoes over to Calvin. And so I called Calvin and said, okay, we've got 150 pounds of potatoes coming to you today. How many more do you need? And he says, I'll look into that and get back to you. He called me back and said, we're going to need a truckload of potatoes, and that will serve 3 communities. By the way, there's 15 communities on the Blackfeet Nation. I know of a couple of them, Bab, St. Mary, Heart Butte. But there's little teeny tiny places like Seville that I'd never heard of. And when he told me that that would take care of 3 communities, I started to freak out. Because I've never bought a truckload of potatoes, and frankly, I don't know that there would be a truckload of potatoes just sitting around somewhere in Montana. So I said, God, you've got to take this one. And I text messaged Calvin, which we can laugh about now, but I said, I'm praying for potatoes, and I sent him 3 potato emojis. And I thought, there's no way. But if there's a way, it's God's way. Well, later on that same week, a pastor from Center UMC in Colorado was calling me saying, hey, I got the message, you need potatoes. And I said, yeah, we need a truckload. And she says, done. Well, it just so happens that she's serving the poorest people in Colorado. She's serving the communities of Center UMC that is devastated by poverty, and they also grow potatoes. And they were sitting on a lot of potatoes because there was a glut in the market. So suddenly we have potatoes coming to Browning. Let me tell you folks, I'm sure glad I said yes. I'm sure glad you all said yes when you reached into your pockets and gave money so that that money could be passed along to buy firewood and food for people who need it. So here I am talking to donors saying, yeah, we're sending stuff out. We're gonna reach people by sled. They're taking people out on snow machines with a calving sled hooked up to it. Have you ever seen a calving sled? Okay, a few of you nod, yes. Well, it's kind of a big sled. They're about 4 feet wide and about 6 feet long and about 1.5 feet deep. And now what I know is you can take quite a bit of food and quite a bit of firewood in a little sled and send it on a snowmobile. And also rescue people in need on that same sled. So the tribe ended up going door to door in those communities where people were snowed in, where the snow was over their roof, knocking on the door and saying, hey, is everybody in there alive? Does anybody have the need for dialysis? Because we'll take them into Browning. And then they would wrap them up in oodles of blankets because it was getting down to 50 degrees below zero. Yeah, holy smokes, amen. And they would wrap them up tight and take them into Browning on that same sled that went out with the food and firewood. Pretty messy work. This is not easy stuff. I had a parishioner roll his truck because he took dog food and cat food over with him. And his pickup truck was loaded to the gills when he left, and we prayed over it and everything, and he left. And on the way back, he was driving like he was driving a truckload full of everything, and his truck was empty. So when he hit the ice, he rolled his truck. Well, fortunately, he survived that, and somebody saw it real soon after it happened and got out and helped him because it was super cold and he was kind of shaken up. He was probably in shock. But anyway, they warmed him up and got him home. And he came into my office and he said, send me again. This is the most important work that I have done in the last 20 years. I said, how about you rest? Let's sleep it off. See where we can put you back into rotation. Give you a chance to think about it. But the story is, that's how everybody was feeling. It's not just about the people that we were reaching. It was also about the death and decay that we have in our own hearts because we're not able to serve in meaningful ways. And so he was sharing a story of resurrection. Then in May, after I've had a chance to kind of breathe, because things have calmed down significantly, I ran into Tom. your Tom, who was pictured up there, and he was grinning from ear to ear. And I hope that he shared this story with you, but if you've already heard it, I would invite you to open your ears and hear it anew today. Because Tom has a cabin near Bab, and he spent a little time over there, and one morning, he and his wife, Charlene, they went out to the cafe and had breakfast. And they ran into a local woman who lives there. And Tom said to her, "So, you had it pretty bad over here this winter, I've heard." And she said, "Yes, let me tell you about it." And then he told me, and I couldn't get a word in edgewise for the next 20 minutes because she wanted to share. And she shared all about her story. She shared that she kept track of every storm that came through on her calendar, and she knew how long it had been since she had heard from certain people, like her neighbors, who she knew the power was cut off to some of them. And she was getting pretty worried about people. And she could tell him about the day that she could no longer get out of her house, and that she and her 7-year-old started playing games and things, and they exhausted every form of entertainment that they had. And pretty soon, they were just staring at each other on the couch for hours on end, wondering if they were still alive. And a few more days came, and a few more endless moments where there was just silence in the house. And then one day, and she had it written on her calendar, there was a knock at her door. And it was 2 guys from the tribe. And she had to dig a little, and they had to dig a little, so that they could even see each other. And they were just doing a welfare check, and they said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And she says, "I'm alive, and my son is alive, and we're the only 2 here." And she thought that was going to be it. But they said, "Okay, well, we have a sled load of firewood and food for you." And she says, "Oh, no, I can't afford that." And the guy from the tribe said, "This is a gift. This is from churches. This is from people in the Flathead Valley and all over Montana. And this is a gift to you. No strings attached." And she said, "Okay, I could use that." And they started to unload it, and her son got involved. And they all had to dig a little more just so they could unload the sled. And then, by the time they had it all unloaded into her house, all 4 of them were in tears. Tears of joy. Tears of thanksgiving. That they were alive and that there was somebody out there thinking about them. And then she continued to tell Tom that kept her going for the next 8 days. That was enough hope that she could communicate with her son again and be excited and even ready for the moment that they finally got plowed out in Bab. A light is among us that is so infectious, yet true and good. It's about raising the dead, folks. It means believing in the impossible, embracing the mystery of God, seeking wisdom, offering love, light, and compassion, delighting in righteousness over material goods, high salaries, or fame. That is our walk with the risen Christ, offering life. And that is our focus. May you rise and witness to the love of Christ in the work in your life, and spread the seeds of hope and love to all whom you meet. Amen.